Hello everyone! Today I'm going over the diet of one of the most famous anime detectives, one who used his genius to try to catch the world's biggest serial killer, who used a supernatural method of killing. Everyone who has watched, or at least heard of the anime Death Note, knows him and his extreme habits, one of the most notable being his eating habits. Yes, you guessed it, in this video I'll be analyzing L Lawliet's diet. This video will be split into 15 sections. Yes, the last one had 6 and this one has 15. I told you I was going to make higher quality, more complex videos. Character profile, Anthropometrics and body composition, medical background, lifestyle and activity profile, socio-economic and environmental factors, dietary preferences and habits, cognitive and behavioral factors, psychological and social factors, metabolism values, nutritional targets, the meal plan, nutritional analysis, total costs, nutritionist recommendations, conclusion and rating. Alright, let's begin. L, also known as Ryuzaki, or by his real name L Lawliet, is the most well-known protagonist of the anime Death Note and a super genius detective. His main job is to catch the killer, Kira, who, as most of you watchers know, is Light Yagami, the antagonist. I won't get into plot details, you can watch the anime yourself, but I will also cover Light's diet in a future video, so don't worry. L is a 25-year-old man in Death Note anime, which takes place in 2004. He doesn't have a clear nationality, being approximately quarter Japanese, quarter English, a quarter Russian, and a quarter French or Italian. L is a very slim, pale, tall young man with messy, neck-length, black hair and black eyes. One of his most noticeable features is the shadow under each eye, a result of chronic insomnia. He is somewhat tall and extremely thin, standing 179 centimeters or 5 foot 10 in freedom units, and weighing just 50 kilograms. Using the BMI formula, the result is 15.6 kilograms per square meter, indicating, by my standards, grade 1 malnutrition, though others may classify him as severely underweight. Regarding body fat percentage, there's no official data. Using references from the anime and manga, I estimate he is not fit under 14%, but not a bodybuilder's level, so over 6%. A reasonable estimate is around 11 to 12%, considering his dietary lifestyle, but relatively sharp jawline. For muscle mass, L appears below the average of 36% for his age group, probably around 30%. Even though he looks extremely thin, a lower estimate would make other metrics like body fat, water, and bone weight inconsistent. There is no canonical information on L's medical history, but based on his lifestyle, it is likely his blood sugar levels are higher than average. He might have type 2 diabetes or at a minimum a high glucose tolerance. Beyond this, L is very skinny, shows signs of grade 1 malnutrition, is an insomniac, and has limited muscle mass, making him somewhat unhealthy overall. As you all know, L is a largely sedentary detective who often sits in a slouch squat position. According to L himself, sitting normally reduces his deductive abilities by 40%, though the origin of this number is unclear.
I don't sit like this because I want to, I have to sit like this. You see, if I were to sit normally, my deductive skills would immediately be reduced by roughly 40%.
If he's a super genius, maybe he knows neuroscience. L's life revolves almost entirely around investigations. His daily routine centers on analyzing information, forming hypotheses, and testing suspects. During active cases, he can work for extremely long periods without regular breaks, shifting between surveillance, discussions with investigators, and private reasoning. He does not follow a conventional daily schedule. His routine is dictated by investigation cycles rather than normal circadian rhythms. In one manga panel, Watery notes that L stayed awake for 102 hours and then slept just under 17 hours. Socially, L is distant and analytical. Conversations are direct and focused on information rather than emotions. He interacts with others primarily as part of investigative strategy, studying both words and reactions carefully. Physically, L is mostly sedentary, spending long periods crouching and squatting while working. He occasionally walks barefoot around his workspace while crouching, which may engage his calves. He also performs small hand movements, such as typing or eating sweets, during investigations. The only physical activities observed are playing tennis with light and a brief fight scene, showing that he is somewhat flexible and slightly athletic, despite his very thin frame.
すげえ車。リムジン？
じゃあ今度はキャンパスで。あ、そうだね。
The story takes place in the early 2000s, specifically 2004, in a modern, well-developed Japan, a first world country. L never attended any formal school, yet he is exceptional, highly advanced, self-taught in criminology, mathematics, psychology, and most sciences, a true prodigy. His work involves taking on only the highest profile cases, those with at least 10 deaths, stakes of $1 million or more, or cases that personally interest him. He is a world-renowned private detective with extremely high standards. Regarding his income and net worth, exact figures are unknown, but he is certainly a billionaire. As a child, he advised Dietary to invest in stocks. Over 2 years, the investments multiplied 20,000 times, from £1 million to £20 billion, demonstrating near superhuman economic ability. He is more than well off, with access to virtually anything he desires. Monthly spending on food is unclear, as L does not shop himself. Dietary likely manages all purchases. L probably consumes only the best and freshest ingredients, prepared by Dietary, who essentially serves as his butler. It is uncertain whether L ever eats out or orders food, but in all observed cases, Dietary prepares everything for him.
そんな雑魚でやってみせる必要はない。しかし第二のキラにしてみれば。
L's diet is dominated by sweet Japanese snacks and desserts. He frequently consumes cakes, candies, pastries, and chocolate, all prepared or provided by Dietary. Most of his food comes from traditional Japanese cuisine or Japanese-style adaptations, such as strawberry shortcake. He also drinks a lot of coffee throughout the series, always adding significant amount of sugar. Other beverages may include sweetened green tea, but coffee is his primary drink. L appears to avoid savory foods entirely. In one scene, he removed prosciutto or a similar meat from a cantaloupe, suggesting a dislike for protein-rich or savory ingredients. It is possible that Dietary supplements his diet to cover nutritional deficiencies, but L still prefers the sweet component. His eating schedule is irregular. He consumes whatever Dietary provides throughout the day. This suggests he snacks frequently, potentially every 3 hours, rather than eating full meals. Calorie intake is difficult to estimate due to his constant snacking, especially during deduction sprees, but it likely averages around 2,500 kilocalories per day. Hydration is likely sufficient despite rarely seeing him drink water, as coffee is 98% water. Considering his high sugar intake, minimal sweat, possible tea consumption, and occasional fruit, it is reasonable to assume he consumes at least 3 liters of water per day. In summary, L follows a high sugar, high caffeine diet with irregular meals and minimal savory foods. Nutritional deficiencies are probable, but his unique psychology in Dietary supplementation may compensate.
こうなることを予想していたのか、やが未来と。しかし
L is exceptionally intelligent, often described as a super genius level detective. Some sources estimate his IQ at 188. He demonstrates advanced skills in logic, deduction, probability estimation.
You see, if I were to sit normally, my deductive skills would immediately be reduced by roughly 40%.
Behavioral, psychology, and forensic analysis. His cognitive processing is rapid, systematic, and highly focused. Remarkably, all of this occurs on a sugar and caffeine-heavy diet, combined with extended periods of wakefulness conditions that would normally impair cognitive function, but somehow his intellect remains unimpaired. L's primary motivation is solving complex crimes, particularly the Kira case. He shows minimal distraction from social or personal matters. His main barriers are physical comfort. He insists on crouching to maintain focus and sustaining energy, which he addresses through his sugar-heavy diet. He is largely self-disciplined, directing nearly all behavior toward investigative goals, often working until mental exhaustion and staying awake for extended periods. His eating behavior is frequent, snack-focused, and sugar-driven. Food serves primarily to maintain mental energy and focus rather than nutrition. Eating is habitual and task-oriented, often occurring during investigations or periods of intense thinking. Notably, he is not gluttonous. He takes time to enjoy his food and occasionally plays with it.
なんて不謹慎な。どさくさに紛れて許せないですね。犯人は私が見つけます。
L exhibits highly focused and stable cognitive functioning, but displays traits of social withdrawal, eccentricity, and obsessive dedication to investigation. There is no canonical evidence of diagnosed mental illness, though his extreme and socially isolating lifestyle is apparent. He does not display classic eating disorders, such as anorexia or bulimia, but his eating is irregular, obsessive, and heavily sugar-focused, prioritizing cognitive performance over nutrition. L treats food as functional fuel for cognition, rather than tradition, culture, or body image. He shows minimal concern for his physical appearance. Body weight and health are secondary to intellectual work. Socially, L interacts primarily with Watari, and indirectly with trusted investigators or intermediaries, often at a distance. Emotional support is minimal, and his closest and most significant relationship is with Watari.
私はこの座り方でないとダメなんです。一般的な座り方をすると推理力が 40% 減です。
I will use the Kachme-Carlos formula to estimate L's basal metabolic rate, BMR, which gives a result of approximately 1,341 kilocalories per day. This is relatively low compared to an average healthy 25-year-old male, primarily due to his low body mass. However, L remains awake for significantly longer than a typical individual, which affects total daily energy expenditure. Standard BMR calculations assume a normal sleep cycle, where metabolic rate during sleep is reduced to approximately 85% of waking metabolic rate. If we model a normal individual as 16 hours awake at 100% metabolic rate, 8 hours asleep at 85%, this results in an equivalent of 22.8 waking hours of energy expenditure per 24-hour period. Based on this, L's adjusted hourly energy expenditure is approximately 58.4 kilocalories per hour, leading to a recalculated daily baseline of about 1,401 kilocalories per day. An additional factor to consider is cognitive demand.
Actually, I found that you don't gain any weight as long as you burn calories by using your brain.
So now you're calling me stupid?
The brain typically accounts for roughly 20% of total BMR in an average individual. While there is no scientific evidence that higher IQ proportionally increases caloric expenditure, for estimation purposes, one could assume elevated cognitive activity slightly increases energy needs. Using this assumption, this raises brain energy expenditure to 526 kilocalories per day, resulting in an adjusted BMR of approximately 1,647 kilocalories per day, with about 42% allocated to brain function. It should be noted that this IQ-based adjustment is speculative and not supported by empirical data, but it provides a working estimate within this fictional analysis. Caffeine intake is another relevant factor. L consumes large amounts of coffee, which can increase metabolic rate modestly. An approximately 3% increase in BMR is a reasonable estimate, bringing his adjusted BMR to approximately 1,696 kilocalories per day, under normal, non-sleep deprived conditions. Sleep deprivation further complicates the model. Extended wakefulness can increase energy expenditure due to psychological stress and reduced efficiency. Since there is no precise data quantifying this effect, an estimated 2% increase in BMR per additional 24 hours of wakefulness can be applied. Using the example where L remains awake for 102 hours, the progression would be: Day 1, 1,696 kilocalories. Day 2, 1,740 kilocalories. Day 3, 1,765 kilocalories. Day 4, 1,800 kilocalories. 1/4 of day 5, 1,836 kilocalories, would be 459 kilocalories. After this period, L sleeps for 17 hours. During sleep, metabolic rate is reduced, but due to high caffeine intake, it may remain elevated at approximately 90% of waking BMR, 52.537 kilocalories per hour, resulting in approximately 893 kilocalories burned during that sleep period. This leads to a total approximately 1,352 kilocalories for day 5. Regarding total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, estimated at approximately 10% given his highly sedentary lifestyle. TEF, thermic effect of food, likely low due to a high carbohydrate, low protein diet, assuming macronutrient distribution of 63% carbohydrates, 25% fat, and 10% protein. TEF is estimated at approximately 8%. EAT, exercise activity thermogenesis, minimal, estimated at approximately 5% due to negligible structured physical activity. Thus, total non-resting energy expenditure, NREE, accounts for approximately 23% of TDEE, while BMR represents 77%. Using these proportions, estimated TDEE values are: Day 1, 2,203 kilocalories. Day 2, 2,247 kilocalories. Day 7, 2,292 kilocalories. Day 4, 2,338 kilocalories, and Day 5, 1,756 kilocalories. Overall, these values are lower than expected, given his high sugar intake. However, this discrepancy reflects the fictional nature of the character, where extreme dietary habits do not produce realistic physiological consequences.
四つ葉の最大のライバル銀行の支店長が9月7日自宅階段で足を滑らせて転落死亡
Based on his TDEs, I can calculate his micronutrient targets for the 5 days. For the micronutrient targets, I won't go into detailed numbers here. Instead, I'll display them briefly on the screen. Just so you know, some of these targets are based on widely accepted scientific data, combined with my own estimations, since there isn't a single fully reliable source to use as a definitive guideline. For example, the recommended minimum sugar intake is around 5% of total calories, or roughly 12.5 grams per 1000 kilocalories. However, I increased it to 23.5 grams, based on the assumption that L, being a super genius, may require more glucose for optimal brain function. Feel free to point out any mistakes or suggest improvements in the comments below. This channel is still small, and I'm working with limited data and experience, but over time, the content will become more advanced while maintaining this simplified presentation style.
はい。どうせ樋口を捕まえるにしても、犯罪者が死ななくなったと断定してからです。
Now for the part most of you have been waiting for, or skipped ahead to, the meal plan. It will be somewhat challenging to construct, given how frequently L eats. However, it is also relatively flexible, since budget is not a constraint. Because I calculated nutritional targets across 5 days, I will present a 5-day meal plan that I believe L Lawliet would realistically follow. Lastly, I will try to stay as faithful as possible to the foods shown in the anime to maintain authenticity. At the same time, I will incorporate additional sweet foods to create a more nutritionally balanced plan that aligns, at least approximately, with the targets established earlier. Day 1. 6 AM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 AM, 2 scoops of Azuki Red Bean ice cream. 12 PM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 12:30 PM, 1 slice of Japanese-style fruit tart. 6 PM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 AM, 2 scoops of matcha ice cream. 9:45 PM, 1 kashiwa mochi. 12 AM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 12:30 AM, 1 mango lassi popsicle. 3:45 AM, 8 caramels. Day 2. 6 AM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 AM, 1 slice of Japanese strawberry shortcake. 9:45 AM, 1 slice Basque cheesecake. 12 PM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 12:30 PM, 2 Zunda mochis. 6 PM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 PM, 6 shiratama dango. 9:45 PM, 3 sugar cubes. 12 AM, 1 small cup of coffee, plus 3 sugar cubes. 12:30 AM, 1 crispy taiyaki. 3:45 AM, 1 bag of Hello Panda biscuits. Day 3. 6 AM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 AM, 1 matcha donut. 9:45 AM, 1 matcha butter mochi. 12 PM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 12:30 PM, 2 mini fruit tarts. 2:45 PM, 5 fruit jelly. 5 PM, 3 Nama chocolate squares. 6 PM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:40 PM, 3 green tea mochi. 9:45 PM, 1 blue popsicle pop. 12 AM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. Day 4. 6 AM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 AM, 3 ohaji. 12 PM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 12:30 PM, 3 eclairs. 6 PM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 PM, 5 ladyfingers. 8:45 PM, 1 sakura mochi. 11 PM, half cup of sweet cherries. 12 AM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 12:30 AM, 1 purin dona. Day 5. 6 AM, 1 small cup of coffee plus 3 sugar cubes. 6:30 AM, 2 pounder ring donut. 7:40 AM, 1 wedge of cantaloupe. 8:40 AM, 1 imagawa yaki. 9:40 AM, 1 banana. 10:40 AM, 3 French macaroons. 11:40 AM, 2 strawberry mochi. 11:45 AM, 2 scoops of blueberry frozen yogurt.
警察の中だけでもキラの捜査情報を得られたものは141人。しかし
After about 2 hours of nutritional analysis on these recipes, I compiled the total nutritional values across 5 days, which I will compare to a set of standards, some of which are my own, so take them with a grain of salt. I'll go through each day and provide some observations. Day 1. Calorie intake is nearly optimal. Carbohydrates are acceptable, while protein could have been higher. I likely could have improved this by selecting different Japanese recipes. Total fat intake is also close to ideal. However, when broken down into fatty acids, the profile is poor, particularly due to high saturated fat levels. That said, some items, like the fruit tart, were taken directly from the anime, so I prioritize authenticity over optimization. High sugar intake combined with low fiber places him in a profile consistent with elevated risk for type 2 diabetes. Micronutrient intake is generally poor. Cholesterol falls within a normal range, but trans fats and vitamin B2 are close to undesirable thresholds. Notably, omega-3 and omega-6 intake is extremely low. Additionally, vitamin C and K levels are insufficient, which would realistically increase the risks of issues such as scurvy or bleeding gums. Ultimately, this highlights the gap between fiction and real physiology. Day 2. Calorie intake and macronutrient distribution are well balanced. However, fatty acid composition remains poor, although trans fat levels are at least low. Sugar intake is acceptable, but fiber remains insufficient. Micronutrients show some improvement, with good levels of iron, phosphorus, vitamin B2, and vitamin B9. Omega fatty acids are still critically low, raising further questions about how L maintains such high cognitive performance. Day 3. Calories are again close to optimal. Carbohydrates are slightly high, and protein remains low, largely due to the difficulty of finding high-protein sweet recipes within Japanese cuisine. Total fat intake is adequate, but fatty acid distribution continues to be suboptimal. Sugar intake is high and fiber is low, consistent with L's overall dietary pattern. Micronutrient intake is poor overall. The most deficient nutrients are calcium, vitamin D, and omega fatty acids. Some positive exceptions include cholesterol, iron, copper, and surprisingly, vitamin C. Day 4. Calorie intake remains consistently near target. Macronutrients are generally well distributed, except for protein, which continues to be insufficient. Maintaining adequate protein intake on a high sugar diet is inherently difficult. Fatty acid composition shows slight improvement compared to previous days, although saturated fats are still elevated. Sugar and fiber intake remain unchanged. Cholesterol is significantly higher, largely due to the inclusion of eclair, again, chosen for authenticity rather than optimization. Micronutrient intake remains poor, with a few positive exceptions, such as iron, selenium, and vitamin B2. Given his appearance, it is somewhat surprising that iron intake is not lower. Day 5. This is the weakest day overall. The only positive aspect are adequate calorie intake, relatively low saturated and trans fats, and a reasonable vitamin C intake, largely due to food consumption. All other nutritional markers are poor, which aligns with expectations, given a diet dominated by desserts and snacks.
あの格好だと渡りですと言わんばかりですし、このホテルに龍崎がいるとバレてしまいますので。
Because in the Death Note canon, Watari is responsible for cooking most of L's meals, it is reasonable to assume that he also handles purchasing the ingredients. Therefore, I will calculate the total cost based on all the ingredients required to prepare these meals. For simplicity, I will assume that some items are store-bought rather than homemade. Prices will be presented in Japanese yen based on 2004 values, along with conversions to American dollars, euros, and British pounds, plus an inflation-adjusted estimate of the total cost in today's currency. Besides the Japanese yen, the other currencies are not inflation adjusted, since each has its own economic context. Because the food is sourced from Japan, the yen is the most relevant reference. Additionally, exchange rates have changed over time, so current values may differ. Overall, this diet is actually cheaper than I expected, especially considering that L is a billionaire in the Death Note canon.
7割くらいまでならカメラで追えそう。
会社の外なら
それは私とあたりだけでは無理。
Given L's strong preference for sugar, it is unrealistic to completely eliminate desserts and snacks from his diet. Removing sugar from L's routine would be extremely difficult, comparable to removing a core dependency. Instead of advising L directly, it is more practical to focus on Watari, who controls food preparation. First, Watari should incorporate recipes from a wider range of cuisines, particularly those higher in protein and fiber, or at least optimize existing Japanese recipes to improve their nutritional profile. He should also increase the inclusion of fresh fruit-based dishes and reduce the amount of added sugar in meals. Substituting refined ingredients, such as replacing all-purpose flour with whole wheat flour, would further improve overall diet quality. Another key recommendation would be to reduce L's daily coffee intake. However, given L's behavioral patterns, this is unlikely to be successful. These recommendations may seem limited, but they are intentionally realistic, taking into account L's established habits and constraints.
この14日から19日に FBI が調べていたものの中にいたと考えて、まず間違いありません。
L Lawliet can be considered an extreme outlier, but also due to his overall physiology and behavioral patterns, which are portrayed as somewhat unrealistic. His diet would not be sustainable for an average person over an extended period. The combination of high sugar intake, low fiber, low protein, and poor micronutrient coverage would likely lead to rapid health deterioration. Realistically, following such a diet could result in short-term symptoms, fatigue, metabolic instability within days, and more serious health issues within weeks. In conclusion, this diet is not realistic and not sustainable for long-term health. At best, it may be temporarily sustainable during short periods of intense mental activity and sleep deprivation, such as exam preparation. Final rating 3 out of 10. So this was L Lawliet's diet. So far, this is by far the video I've worked on the most, and it's a significant upgrade compared to my previous Toshi's diet video. While working on this script, I learned new things, some of which I haven't even covered in university yet, and probably never will. I hope you understood that L's diet isn't just a random meal plan, but a calculated one designed to boost brain performance rather than maintain overall health. I apologize if it went too long, but I wanted to cover every aspect to make everything make sense. If you have any advice or tips that could help me improve my diet analysis, meal planning methods, or overall video quality, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Until the next video, I wish you a wonderful day. Stay healthy,